food-loving friend always insists on cooking for everyone, but his culinary disasters might be a friendship-ending recipe if I'm honest. About 6 months ago, I packed up my life and moved across the country to a new state. The good news was that I already had a lot of friends and family here, which made the prospect of relocating a lot less daunting. Not long after sharing my move on Facebook, a guy named Michael, who I barely knew aside from a fleeting introduction through mutual friends, reached out to me. It turned out he was moving to the same city and wanted to know if I'd like to meet up. I thought, why not? Once we both settled into our new lives, we started hanging out every so often. I soon realized that while I had a tight schedule thanks to work and a pretty solid social circle already, Michael was in a completely different place. He'd just gone through a divorce, moved in with an old friend who owned a house, and was renting a room there. There was a third roommate in the mix too. Unlike me, Michael didn't have a job lined up yet, which left him with endless free time, and it quickly became clear that he'd be the one initiating most of our hangouts. Here's the thing about Michael, he absolutely loves to cook. That enthusiasm became clear the very first time we hung out when he came over to my place and insisted on cooking dinner. I appreciated the gesture, but the meal was heavy on dairy, which never sits well with me. I'd even mentioned this very point. I also had voiced some preferences about ingredients, but Michael was pretty stubborn, insisting that his dish needed exactly what I'd said I didn't want. I chalked it up to a one-off, no big deal. But every single subsequent invitation from Michael revolved around food. Either he wanted to cook at my place, or he'd invite me over to his house to cook for me, his roommates, and sometimes their significant others. The more I ate Michael's cooking, the more I realized I just couldn't stomach it, literally or figuratively. I vividly remember the first dinner at his place with the roommates. The silence was almost deafening, and no one commented on the food until Michael, practically vibrating with anticipation, would break the quiet with, "How is it?" That was usually met with a few strained smiles and half-hearted praise. The worst was the evening when none of us could finish what was on our plates. Everyone scrambled to make excuses about already being full, just to avoid another bite. After that, I started pivoting every time Michael suggested hanging out. We live in a city bursting with fun, outdoor activities, plenty of socially distanced options. So, I'd throw out ideas, hoping we could do something, anything, that didn't involve him cooking. He always dodged those and tried to steer things back to his kitchen, reminding me that nothing made him happier than cooking for others. I began to back away gently, just politely declining more and more. Then, last night, Michael sent a message saying he'd gotten into a huge fight with his roommate and was really upset. I spent some time texting with him, trying to be supportive and help him calm down. Eventually, because he sounded so miserable, I offered for him to come over for a beer and a breather. He immediately asked if I'd already eaten, and when I said yes, it was pretty late by then. He asked if he could come by the next night instead. I agreed, and his first response was, "Great, I'll stop at the store and cook X dish for us." I explained that I was on a diet and couldn't really eat that, but told him he was still welcome to come for drinks and video games. He just would not let it go, pushing for details on my diet, trying to negotiate what he could make. Eventually, he landed on something that I technically could eat, making it impossible for me to object without coming off as completely unreasonable. This morning, dreading the prospect of another one of his meals, I texted Michael that I'd forgotten about plans I already had for the evening and wouldn't be home until after 8. Too late for dinner. I told him he was still welcome to come by then, or maybe we could find another time. Now, I'm at a crossroads. I honestly feel guilty because, aside from his roommates, Michael hardly knows anyone here. It sounds like he's on rocky ground with them now, and I know he could use a friend, but I absolutely can't deal with his obsession with cooking every time we meet. If I tell him the truth, that I genuinely can't stand his food, I think it might devastate him more than just quietly letting things fizzle out. I'm still not sure what to do, but right now, retreating seems like the kindest option. Update 1. After spending some time thinking about everything, I realized it was never just about the cooking. I didn't want to hurt Michael's feelings, but deep down, I really didn't care to be friends with him anymore. It became obvious to me that he never wanted to do anything I suggested, and that truly bothered me. Our entire friendship felt like it was about me always making time for what he enjoyed, mainly having me cook for us, even though I was getting nothing out of it at all. Feeling that imbalance became exhausting, so I started to distance myself from Michael. I figured it was best to put some space between us, answering his texts hours later and politely declining his invitations. Life had also gotten a bit more complicated for me after an accident a few weeks ago. I was put on medication that left me tired all the time, so my free time shrank down to almost nothing. Then one night, near midnight, I got a text from Michael saying he was worried about me. When I asked him why, he replied, "You used to be my best friend, but now you just ignore me." There were so many typos that I knew he'd been drinking. I tried to be patient and told him I had just been busy. I also pointed out that I had actually invited him to do a lot of things with me, but he never wanted to join and always turned my invites down. He did acknowledge that was true, apologized, and said that if in the future I wanted to do something I enjoyed, he'd make sure to accept. I appreciated the apology, but it felt a bit hollow. 3 days later, Michael messaged me again, asking when I'd be free to hang out. I responded with, "What do you have in mind?" Because I wanted to know what he wanted to do before agreeing to spend time together. He just kept pushing back, insisting he'd like to see me and was available whenever I was free. When I finally gave him a time frame, he jumped right to, "I'd love to come over and cook for us." That was it for me. It was the final straw, the clear sign nothing had changed. So, I sent him a message, "Hey, so to be honest, you're a nice person, but I'm not interested in hanging out tonight or at all. The time that we have spent together has made me realize that we don't actually have much in common, and when you weren't into any of the stuff I enjoy doing, I lost interest in the friendship. Combined with the fact that I still have so much pain from my accident, it just seems like too much effort. No hard feelings. I really do wish you the best." After sending that, I blocked him. Maybe I'm a jerk for the way I ended things, but at this point, life feels too short to waste so much time doing what other people want. I've spent too long never advocating for myself and always falling into draining, one-sided friendships. This time, though, I feel proud of what I said and relieved to finally move on. There's something I haven't shared before. When Michael had a falling out with his roommates, it wasn't just a small disagreement. They asked him to move out because he was being so disrespectful and aloof. I didn't want to seem unfairly harsh by including that, but looking back, I see just how much I downplayed his behavior, even when describing him to others. The truth is, I couldn't even bring myself to fully express how awful he could be without feeling guilty about it. It's astonishing to me how many people make blind assumptions about him, and every single one misses the reality completely. Update 2. One person who just kept sending me angry comments was someone named Recycled User. I was really curious about why he seemed to think I was such a villain, so I decided to message him privately and find out. To my surprise, our conversation ended up being really productive. I shared some more personal details about the situation with him, details that I had actually left out when I first told the story, thinking they weren't that important, only to realize that maybe they were actually the root of the whole problem. It was a huge relief to finally get things off my chest, and I appreciated that Recycled User encouraged me to take a deeper look at what had happened. So, here I am, ready to share the context I skipped over before, plus some unexpected new developments since everything unfolded. When Michael and I first moved to this state, we were both genuinely interested in each other romantically. We had been online friends for a while, having only met once briefly in real life, and I think we both expected things to naturally progress once we ended up in the same city. I hadn't mentioned this before, because after spending more time together, I realized I just didn't have those feelings for him anymore. I let him know right away, and we both agreed to stay friends. Honestly, one of the biggest reasons we connected initially was our shared love of outdoor activities. For everyone who assumed Michael couldn't, or wasn't interested in, joining my hikes and trips, it really wasn't like that. He's actually very physically fit and told me repeatedly in the beginning how much he loved these adventures. But every time he wanted to meet up, it always ended up at one of our places, just hanging out indoors. And, almost every time, it would somehow turn into us laying on the couch, and him trying to edge us into cuddling. I know I complained about his cooking, but looking back, the real problem was that he just wouldn't respect the friendship boundary I'd set. All of that frustration about his mediocre food was really about him ignoring my wishes. I tried so hard to keep our friendship going by inviting him to do things he claimed to love, but he never agreed, which started to make me think he was insincere about even wanting to be friends. Eventually, that suspicion and built-up resentment spilled over, and I ended up telling him off, then blocking him completely. I realize now how harsh that sounds, but I just felt like this person completely disregarded my boundaries, and that, to me, made what I did feel justified. But there's more. The day after everything went down, I got home from work and found a stuffed animal on my doorstep, with an apology note that just said, "Sorry for being a bad friend." I thought about it for a couple of days, and after mulling it over, I started to wonder if maybe I'd been too harsh. I unblocked Michael and thanked him for the stuffed animal. Then, I apologized for blocking him, and I was totally honest, told him that I felt disrespected by him crossing boundaries and never being interested in anything I suggested. I expected him to be hurt or defensive, but he actually apologized, over and over. He admitted that things at home with his roommates had been getting worse and worse over the last 2 months, and that he was physically and mentally exhausted, which was why he hadn't wanted to go out and do anything. He told me he felt every single time he declined my invites. We grew further apart, but he just didn't know how to handle all the mess at home while maintaining our friendship. He also said he regretted not communicating any of this to me earlier, and recognized that he'd crossed the line with my boundaries by trying to force something that I'd already told him wasn't going to happen. His message was long, heartfelt, even, and it moved me more than I expected. He even told me that, the day I sent that final message and blocked him, it hit him how much he'd lost. Having pushed away his only friend in this city and living in that toxic roommate situation, he realized he didn't want to stay here any longer. The same day he dropped the stuffed animal on my porch, he packed up a U-Haul and moved back to his parents' house. Over the last couple of days, we both apologized a lot. We've started easing back into the friendship we used to have, just being those silly, meme-sharing internet friends long distance, like we were before. He told me he's hoping that one day, when he's in a better place, we can meet up again, and I can get to know him as the person he really is. It's not the most dramatic ending, I know, but sometimes a soft reset is exactly what two people need. Update 3. A week after that soft reset, the universe decided it had jokes. I went to a friend's birthday picnic at the park, the kind where everyone brings something and dogs wander around stealing napkins. I ended up sitting next to a woman I hadn't met before, and we clicked immediately in that easy, low-stakes way. Work chatter, moving stories, the usual. At some point she mentioned she was recently divorced and had moved back for a fresh start. Then she laughed and said, "My ex used to insist on cooking for everyone, like, all the time, and it was always heavy cream and I don't even know." My brain did that quiet record scratch. I asked his name. She said Michael like it was a word she'd practiced not flinching at. We both just sat there for a second, processing the coincidence under a string of patio lights hung between two trees. She wasn't out to drag him. If anything, she was very measured. She told me the cooking thing had started out sweet and then turned into the only way he wanted to connect with people. He'd plan whole evenings around it, push past preferences, and get hurt if anyone said no. It didn't surprise me, but hearing it out loud from someone who had been with him for years reframed it. She said he'd told her recently he was finally in therapy and had apologized to her for a lot of it. She said she accepted the apology. Then she changed the subject and asked me where I bought my sandals, and that was that. I debated saying anything to him. There was no real need to, but he texted me first 2 days later. It was a picture of a syllabus and an ugly plastic knife guard on a cheap paring knife. Day 1 of fundamentals, he wrote. They made us interview our diners before we cook for them. I know it's basic, but it hit. Thanks for being honest with me. I congratulated him and told him I was glad he was taking classes. He didn't try to pivot the conversation into a dinner. He didn't ask for a second chance. He just sent a photo of a pile of diced onions and said, "Uniform cuts are humbling." I laughed in spite of myself. Then one of his old roommates DM'd me that night. He was polite but blunt and asked if I was okay, and if I knew Michael had told them I'd let him on. I stared at my phone for a long time. That version of the story sat wrong in my chest. I had two options: ignore it and let a stranger's idea of me live out there, or ask Michael straight up. So I asked. I told him what the roommate had messaged and asked if that's what he'd said. He didn't dodge. He said yes, that a while ago, when he was angry and drunk, he'd painted it that way to save face. He said he hadn't believed it for a while now, but he was ashamed he'd said it at all. He told me he would fix it. I didn't ask him to prove it, but 30 minutes later I got a screenshot of a group text to the roommates where he wrote, "I lied about why she cut me off. It was because I wasn't respecting boundaries, not because she misled me. That's on me." It was short and clear. No grandstanding. I didn't realize how much I'd needed that until the weight in my shoulders let go. He came back into town briefly to tie up loose ends with his landlord and asked if he could drop something off. I told him he could leave it with the leasing office. He said it was a book and a spatula he'd borrowed, and he could do that. 10 minutes later, I got a photo of his hand holding my old spatula in front of the leasing desk plant like a hostage exchange. Next to it was a copy of Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat with a sticky note on the cover that said, "If you don't want this, toss it." I'm not trying to say anything with it except I finally get what I missed. I kept the spatula. I left the book for the library in our lobby. It felt like the right level of symbolic. He's been quiet in the way that feels respectful. He'll send the occasional photo from his class, burnt omelet failures, a rubric with a good seasoning checkmark circled like a gold star. He told me his therapist has him practicing asking for consent around the smallest things, so in one message he actually asked if sending me class photos was annoying. I told him it wasn't, and that if it ever became too much, I'd say so. He said, "Okay. I won't assume." The last unexpected twist was a message from his ex-wife a few days later. She thanked me for not piling on at the park. She said she and Michael had one final phone call months ago that had been kinder than anything else between them for a long while. I told her I was glad for both of them, and that was the end of it. There's no reunion coming, and I'm not bracing for a grand gesture. We've landed in a very ordinary place where the boundary lines are visible and nobody's trying to blur them. It's strange how much that alone can make you feel like the whole situation recalibrated. He can be someone else, somewhere else, and I can be here, and neither thing has to threaten the other. It's not exciting, but it is clean. And I'll take clean over complicated any day. Update 4. Last weekend my coworker forwarded an email from the community college. The culinary program needed real people with real preferences to act as diners for a personalization lab. $20, a feedback card, no obligation to stay for the debrief. I signed up thinking I'd get a quiet Saturday morning with a free lunch and a hairnet I could make fun of later. The classroom was exactly what you'd expect if a kitchen at a hospital had a baby. Steel tables, the soft chemical smell of sanitizer, timers going off with no consistency. A student in a gray apron with a blunt bob handed me a clipboard and a Sharpie and told me to circle anything I didn't eat. "Be as annoying as you want," she said. I circled dairy like I always do and added a few texture things I've learned the hard way. I wrote in the margins, "Please don't make this a secret cream situation." I didn't see him at first. Then my eyes landed on a name tag clipped to a coat hook and my stomach did a little lap. Michael was at station 4, head down, knife going through zucchini with that exact practiced rhythm I remembered him scoffing at in a text. "Uniform cuts are humbling." I considered ghosting. Then an instructor with a calm, tired voice called out, "Diners with cards 1 through 5 to station 4. He looked up, saw me, and did the exact opposite of what every previous version of him would have done. He went to the instructor first. They spoke quietly, then she came to me and said, "We can reassign you if you'd prefer." It was such a small, adult exchange that I almost laughed. I told her I was fine staying put if he was. He returned and asked, in that careful, practicing consent cadence I'd been seeing in his messages, if I was comfortable being his diner. I said yes. He didn't perform the menu at me. He asked questions like a survey. What does no dairy mean to you? Butter? Ghee? Do you care about a shared pan if I sanitize it? Heat level? Crunch level? He wrote things down, big block letters, no dairy, and then underlined it like a teenager doing vocabulary homework. He offered 2 ideas and waited. I chose the one that sounded least like a dare. Lemony white beans with charred broccoli and toasted almonds, herbs if I wanted them, chili oil only if I said so. While he cooked, he didn't hover. No, you're gonna love this. No curling in for reported approval. He stayed at his station and checked thermometers and wiped his board like it was an exam. A student at the next table announced vegan carrot soup. And ladle guy started filling bowls with something whose surface had the glossy slickness of butter. I watched Michael clock it, watched the ladle go from pot to bowl to pot again, and then say, gently but loud enough, "Hey, is that clarified butter in your mirepoix?" Ladle guy froze. The instructor swooped, smelled, and pulled the bowls before they hit anyone's hands. They took a breath, relabeled, remade. Nobody had an allergic reaction because someone noticed sheen. It wasn't heroic. It was just paying attention. My plate came out looking unfussy and almost pretty in the way food gets when someone's trying to impress you without overcomplicating it. The beans were creamy without cream. The broccoli had that bitter char that makes lemon feel like it's doing a job. He brought the chili oil in a ramekin and asked if I wanted it on or beside. I said beside. He put it beside. He didn't ask me how it was. He slid a feedback card toward me and said, "Write whatever you actually think." It was good. Not mind-blowing. Good like, if this was my Tuesday dinner, I'd eat all of it and feel fine after. I wrote, seasoning balanced, textures intentional, acid makes sense. Under communication, I wrote, you didn't assume. At the end, the instructor made a small speech about meeting diners where they are and announced 2 externships for the students who'd shown the best technical improvement and the best service awareness. I don't know which bucket he fell into, but Michael's name was one of the 2. He blinked like he'd misheard and then smiled the way people do when they decide not to look over their shoulder to see if there's another Michael. I clapped because everyone was clapping. He glanced at the line of diners, saw me, and gave the kind of nod that reads as thank you and also as don't worry, I'm not going to make a thing out of this. On my way out, he was resetting his station. He didn't follow. He didn't wave me down. He wiped down his board, stacked pans in an orderly little shrine to not getting in trouble, and that was that. An hour later, I got a text asking if it was okay to share some news. I said yes. He sent a photo of a letter on school letterhead offering him a 2-month stage at a small place across town with a chef I've actually heard of, his name spelled right in the header. Then a second photo, the jacket they'd lent him, his first name embroidered in thread that didn't match quite right. I know this doesn't change anything between us, he wrote. Just wanted to say thanks for coming and for your card. I keep rereading the word didn't assume. That night I found my copy of the feedback sheet crumpled at the bottom of my bag with a faint smear of lemon oil on the corner. I stuck it to my fridge under a magnet shaped like a pear. It felt boring in the best possible way to look at the words and not have any other story attached. No secret weight, no argument brewing under the surface, just a record of a lunch that didn't make me feel sick and a person doing what they said they were doing. 2 days later, our office went to the place where he's staging for a team lunch I didn't plan. It's tiny, open kitchen, chalkboard menu that changes too often for the staff to remember it by heart. I scanned the line looking for him and didn't see him until the very end of the meal, when a runner set down a small plate of grilled peaches, a drizzle of honey, and a bowl of almond whipped something with the check. From the kitchen, she said, under the peaches, in Sharpie on the rim, someone had written no dairy. It wasn't for me specifically, the table next to us had the same plate, same words, but it made me laugh anyway. The peaches were perfect. I didn't ask who made them. I left a reasonable tip, paid my share, and went back to my desk. He hasn't texted since. I don't think that means anything bad. In some weird, tidy way, it feels like everything finally landed where it was supposed to. He's in a kitchen where asking before you add the chili oil is a skill, not a personal shortcoming, and my social life happens outside of anybody's need for me to be their proof they're getting better. It's not exciting. It's clean. I'll keep choosing that. Update 5. My boss roped me into checking people in at a fundraiser at the Contemporary Art Museum, the kind of event with acrylic chairs that look like no one is sitting in them and past trays you can't quite chase without admitting you care. The restaurant where Michael is staging had the food. I told myself I was just there to hand out name tags and spell Eleanor correctly 3 different ways. The event planner had a system like a board game, colored dots on place cards for allergies and preferences. A red dot for no dairy. Blue for nuts. Green for vegetarian. I stuck a red dot on mine and slid it into the row like a kid finishing a matching worksheet. It should have been boring, and then the museum's power flickered. Once, twice, gone. The emergency lights kicked in with that low, Not quite bright glow that makes everyone's skin look like a Renaissance painting. The band coasted to acoustic. The caterers had been timing the hot course for the kind of synchronized landing that makes people decide whether to donate again next year. You could feel the math evaporate. I watched from the check-in table as the kitchen team froze and then did the thing good teams do. They turned into a school of fish. The chef started calling for cold plates and for the runners to hold. Someone dragged Cambros onto a folding table and turned it into a cold station. An faux manager tried to keep the vibe calm with his "we're pivoting, it will be seamless" voice. At the pass, under a strip of battery lanterns that made everything look like a campout, I saw Michael. He was just hands in motion, stacking bowls, marking with a Sharpie, wiping down, not important in the way the person you're glad is. There never makes himself the center. Someone reached for a pan of something glossy and pale to brush the bread, habit fingers, and he checked their wrist without grabbing it and said, "Steady, that's butter." We said no dairy on tables with red. The someone hesitated and the faux manager leaned in like just this once wouldn't hurt anything. The chef lifted his head and said, "Olive oil," and it moved like a relay race. The runners started calling out colors before they left the pass. Blue 2, red 1, green 3. The plates were suddenly all about acid and crunch, shaved fennel and citrus, pickled beets with something that crunched like a good decision, a tomato dish that didn't need heat to feel cooked. When my plate landed, the server set it down and tapped the red dot like she was hitting a checkpoint. "Checked for you," she said. No drama. I ate in the dark and it was one of those funny meals that tastes like competence, which is its own flavor. He didn't approach me, he didn't have to. After most of the plates were out and the band had reinvented themselves as a string trio, he took a roll of tape and put a strip across the front of the lemonade dispenser so the nozzle wouldn't drip onto the tablecloth. It was such a tiny, unshowy thing that I had to look away so I wouldn't laugh. That was the story, a strip of tape instead of a performance. The next morning, I had a text from a number I still haven't changed the name on. "Is it okay if I share something?" I said yes. He sent a photo of a short email from the restaurant's owner offering him a paid spot at their new sister place 2 states away. 6 months guaranteed, possibility to extend. "I leave in 3 weeks, he wrote. "I wanted to tell you because it felt wrong to just vanish out of the city we happened to both pick." Then, after a minute, no expectation. Just information. He said he was going to try a real, low-key going away thing with his class at a park and asked if it was okay if he didn't invite me. It was such an odd, precise kindness that I had to read it twice. I told him it was okay and also appreciated. He sent back a thumbs up and a photo of a stack of index cards with "ask before" written on the top one like a label maker had given up and turned into handwriting. 2 days after that, a white envelope showed up at my leasing office with my name in block letters. Inside was a place card from the fundraiser with my red dot still attached and a sticky note that said, "I built a checklist from this and your refrigerator card. I'm going to keep using it." There wasn't a signature. It didn't need one. I stuck the place card under the pear magnet on my fridge next to the feedback sheet. It looked like an exhibit on how to be easy to feed without also being easy to steamroll. On his last week in town, I ended up at the farmer's market, half for vegetables and half for the people watching. The restaurant had a stall doing a cold menu because it was already 85 degrees at 10 in the morning. A kid in a paper hat handed out little half sheets for preferences like the lab did, Sharpies tied to the table with twine. People rolled their eyes and filled them out anyway. I got a citrusy chickpea bowl that tasted like someone remembered that the sun makes food better, and when the runner set it down, the bowl had a small red dot on the rim. Maybe they all did. I didn't check. He sent one last text the night before he left, driving early. "Didn't want to surprise you with a goodbye or make it a thing. Thank you for putting the edges where they needed to be." I wrote back, "Good luck. Ask before. Don't assume." He sent a knife emoji and a lemon. This morning I opened the fridge for coffee and saw the corner of the fundraiser card peeking out from under the pear magnet. The little red dot has started to peel, the glue not designed for long-term meaning. I pressed it back down. Nothing about this is cinematic. He's going to another kitchen where the rules are printed and the margins are there so he can write in them. I'm here, not dodging invitations I don't want and not translating my preferences into apology. It's not exciting, it's clean. And I'm still choosing that. Update 6. 2 months after the fundraiser, the office threw a baby shower for our project manager in the conference room with a flickering light no one can fix, the one that makes the cake look like it's breathing. Someone ordered 3 quiches, a mountain of mini croissants lacquered with something shiny, and cupcakes with frosting piled like beehives. The intern threw napkins onto the table like confetti and then looked at me because apparently, I've become the person who makes food not an obstacle course. I opened the junk drawer in the break room and found a half sheet of those tiny color-coding dots we use on file folders. I stuck a red one on the little tent with my name and, without asking anybody's permission, made a quick station for everyone to do the same. By the time someone found a Sharpie that wasn't dry, there was a line. People wrote fast and sloppy: no gluten, no dairy, no goat cheese, no onion, halal, no pork, vegetarian, pregnant, because when you give people a place to put a thing they're used to hiding, they rush it out. A catering guy had put the quiches into a neat formation and laid out the ingredient sheets like he was a museum docent. Spinach and feta, one said. Mushroom and Gruyere. The third said cheddar. The frosting on the cupcake said flex. Almond? Vanilla bean? I picked up the ingredient card and found almond emulsion, which either means almond or it means someone wanted to charge an extra $1. Our CFO, who always eats like she's taking a test and hovers her fork over her plate like she's waiting for permission from God, stood at the edge of the table and looked at the cupcakes like they were ticking. She had a blue dot on her name card and a tiny peanut/tree nuts listed so neatly it looked typed. I told her I'd check. The catering guy shrugged and said he thought almond emulsion meant flavoring, which only helps if your anaphylaxis has gone to culinary school. I asked if we could put them aside until he could call. He looked at the line behind me, he looked at the clock, he looked at me. Yeah, he said. Hang on. He pulled them, made a call, came back pale. We're sending a new batch, he said. No almond anything. We moved on to citrus fruit and croissants. Someone joked that it was a lot of work for pastries. Our CFO ate a strawberry like it had earned it. No one went to the hospital. It felt like a boring magic trick, no reveal, just nothing bad happening because somebody bothered to point a finger and say no. At my desk after, while I was unsticking red dots from my fingers, I got an email from a stranger with a magazine domain asking if they could fact check a piece. They were doing a short profile on a young cook at a tiny restaurant 2 states away who'd implemented preference cards on his station and started running pre-service questions like a checklist. They said he'd mentioned a diner with a red dot system who'd made something click. They wanted to know if they could use my first name. I read it twice. The subject line had his last name and it spelled right, which made me feel weirdly proud and then ridiculous for feeling proud. I wrote back that I was fine being referenced but I'd rather not be named. They thanked me and asked permission for one line. A diner once wrote you didn't assume on a feedback card. I said okay to the line, no to the name. They sent a thumbs up emoji that somehow translated an email. The piece went up the next week. A coworker slid it into our team chat with "Isn't this the little place we went that one time?" There was a photo of the pass under warm bulbs and a clip at the corner holding a laminated card that said "Ask Before" in thick block letters with a lemon doodled next to it like a kid had gotten into the art supplies. The quote under the photo was from him and it was so simple it made me close my laptop for a second. Assumption is seasoning you can't take out. I didn't text him. He beat me to it with a message that started, "Is it okay to send you the article?" I told him I'd already seen it and that the lemon doodle was a little on the nose. He said it wasn't his, it belonged to the pastry guy who kept drawing fruit in the corners like a child, and then asked if I wanted to be named if the print edition ran a longer version. I told him no and thanked him for asking. He wrote back, "Copy. No names," and then nothing else. 2 Thursdays later, my neighbor knocked on my door with the posture of someone about to ask for money but instead asked for help. Her sister is doing chemo and craves company more than food, but when people show up with trays they bring what they know, cream soups and casseroles that turn into bricks in the fridge. She asked if I knew how to tell people, nicely, not to bring dairy-heavy comfort food. I pulled the pear magnet off my fridge and handed her the place card from the gala with my red dot still clinging to it by sheer stubbornness. "This," I said. And a stack of index cards. We set up a little table in her living room with a bowl of Sharpies and a sign that said, "Tell us what you love and what your body hates." People looked relieved. Someone wrote "No fish, please," and someone else wrote "I will eat anything that crunches." An aunt brought broth and asked if it was okay to leave it and run. We put a green dot on no onions and a red dot on no dairy, and a teenager with chipped black nail polish sorted lids like she'd been waiting to be useful all day. We didn't solve cancer. We made a moment where people could show up without making extra work for the person they were trying to care for. The sister took a spoonful of something sour and bright and smiled in a way that looked like a muscle had been released. In the mail the next morning was a postcard from 2 states away with a lemon stamp and a bad drawing of a knife in the corner. The handwriting was that same careful block he uses when he's trying to not skip. I asked Chef if I could build a version of the dot thing for the line, it said. He said yes if I could keep it tidy. We laminated them. I printed "No dairy" in red. I keep catching my own hand before the butter. On the back he'd written, "Is it okay to keep you posted if anything big changes?" I told him he didn't need my permission to live his life and also yes, if he wanted to share, that was fine, with the understanding that a no from me would be a no. He replied, "Understood," which read more like a promise than a text. Last week, I finally peeled the red dot off the gala card. It came away with that gummy reluctance stickers get when they've been asked to be more permanent than they were made to be. I replaced it with a fresh one from the break room and pressed it down under the pear magnet. It's a small, silly shrine to a system that's mostly just paying attention with a little bit of tape and ink. He sent one more thing yesterday, a photo of a tiny prep list with "No dairy" written at the top and then, underneath, "Ask about onions," and then, at the very bottom, "Ask before." No caption. No fishing. Just a list that ends with the thing he keeps saying out loud so he won't forget. I looked at it, put my phone down, and went to make dinner. Beans and broccoli again because it's Tuesday and repetition is not a crisis. I put the chili oil beside and didn't put it on until I wanted it. It's still not exciting. It's still clean. I'm still choosing that.